Growing up, I was told my town, Kfar Kama, was one of the few places where Circassian traditions were so well preserved. But much like every single Circassian community, we have also adapted ourselves to other cultures. Whether it's due to religion or geography, every community has become its own brand of the culture that once existed. Even the two Israeli towns that are only located an hour apart have different outlooks on life. Kfar Kama is known to have developed its own dance style, songs, and even diverted from the original Shapsal dialect. Once, we might have been divided by the different clans, but we are now divided by the countries and locations we were placed at as refugees. As a result, there is truly no place like Kfar Kama. Population of around 3,500, it is a community so intertwined with its inhabitants as well as culture and religion that it's hard to explain one without the other. Most people born there grow up, marry, and pass away surrounded by the same people they knew their whole lives. A place where you don't need to talk to someone in order to know their family history. It's a very close and loyal town, as they had to be in order to protect what little was left of them from the war. But in order to understand, we need to backtrack to its very origins. Throughout most of history, Circassians resided in their native land of the Northwest Caucasus Mountains. The 12 stars in their flag represent the 12 main clans, and despite being predominantly Muslim, they have a long history of paganism mixed into their traditions. Thus, they were often viewed as primitive by the stronger bodies of power, commonly traded as slaves or soldiers. In 1763, they were invaded by the Russian Empire, resulting in a 101-year war and the genocide many historians consider the worst of the 18th century, ending in over 95% of the population either dead or displaced. Crossing the Black Sea to the Ottoman Empire as refugees, they were resettled to different places under Ottoman occupation, one of which is what we now know as Israel. The first Circassian town that was settled in what was then a district called Palestine was Rahania in 1873, a predominantly Abzak clan group who had come from Turkey through land. The second batch of refugees was made up mostly of the Shapsla clan. They went from Turkey to Greece, then crossed the Mediterranean Sea and settled Kfar Kama in 1876. Then, due to the Ottoman wars against Russia and the Balkans, a third town was formed in 1880, this time by Circassians who were initially settled in Bulgaria, but once again had to leave as refugees 15 years after the genocide. They settled close to shore and called the town Meza. However, it only survived 30 years, as the village was ravaged by malaria and abandoned in 1910, with a few surviving families migrating to Kfar Kama, Rahania, and even Jordan. Unfortunately, this wasn't an isolated case, and it's only a reflection of the struggles these new settlements had to face, as rebuilding their refugee lives did not mark the end of their struggles, but the start of many. The name Kfar Kama is a rather modern reinvention, Kfar meaning village in Hebrew, and Kama meaning the Circassian blade. The town was built on the ruins and stones of an ancient Byzantine town called Helenopolis, with some excavations also revealing artifacts as old as the 4th and 6th century. The older houses, or the Old Village, as that area of town tends to be called, were built the Caucasus style, with people expecting heavy snow and unfamiliar with the climate of the Middle East. However, the stone walls that would surround their houses soon seemed to gain their benefit, as bandits and gangs familiarized themselves. It was an area known for its stone mill, and would attract many visitors to pass by, particularly a Bedouin tribe that would take advantage of the already weakened refugees. People would place glass shards atop the stone walls to prevent thieves from climbing them. Circassian girls began wearing a fabric called shashiv that would cover their full bodies to prevent getting kidnapped. Rahania, on the other hand, got along with the local groups of its surrounding area, as it was much smaller and isolated in comparison. It was for this reason that in 1858, Kfar Kama suggested Circassians should serve in the Israeli army for the sake of proving their worth and respect, and, in a way, forced the hands of the Rahanians to join. This integration of culture, whether it was intentional or not, is the reason why there is no other place like Kfar Kama. It's a combination of outside influences and unique experiences all mixed with guarded isolation, and you can see it clearly played out in this video. It's the day of the wedding, and as tradition, the women spent all morning preparing food while the young men cooked it. The first batch would be passed around town and delivered to the elderly and sick. Then at lunch, it would be served to all the men who chose to come, usually right after prayer time. Then served to the women and then the children. In this video, you can see the different cultural influences just in the way they dress. Some are wearing the traditional Circassian hat worn by men, while others are wearing a keffiyeh typically worn by Arabs. But just off to the side, you can see that some of the young men serving them are also wearing the Israeli military uniform. This is probably why the fear of the culture dying out was instilled in me so young. It's why the town is closed to anyone who isn't Circassian. They had to be for the sake of preservation. Rising from a group genocided just for its culture created a people even more stubborn to keep it alive. Due to the lack of the written word, most traditions had to be kept by word of mouth. Dancing at every possible celebration, old melodies played by accordion, songs taught by grandmothers and school teachers. My grandmother, in particular, was well known for this, as she was also a school teacher. She would tell stories and myths that were taught to her by her mother and her mother before that, dating generations back to ancient times when Circassians were still pagan. Myths so old they shared origins with the familiar Greek and Persian ones we know today. Growing up, I was always told of the genocide, but my mother wasn't, and neither were the previous generations. Although they were told stories of their great motherland and the Russians who served as enemies, that part of history was seen as arbitrary, a shameful, unjust defeat. Only recently was there a revival of the historical facts, reclaiming the horrific acts committed against us, and a need for accountability. But this interpretation of struggles as weakness isn't uncommon. Our town may have a dark history, but it's never talked about. Many people dismiss it or try to forget it because it doesn't fit into the mold of the perfect happy town thriving with culture. It paints the harsher truth of refugee lives and the reality of losing a culture. In a way, it's understandable why it's not talked about. It's a coping mechanism. It's much easier to cling on to the hope that as long as we're alive, so is the culture. Easier to ignore the struggles of the past because it only highlights the injustices faced, to see our town as a haven because everyone else was an antagonist. After the ending of the USSR in 1991, some townfolk would play with the radio to see if they could catch any Circassians. The first name they caught was a poet born in the Caucasus Mountains. He was the first man in a wave of Circassian Russian artists to visit the town, who, until this point, had no idea Circassians existed outside Russia. For many people, it was their first time interacting with someone who has seen their homeland beyond the stories they were told. Kids got their school days off and lined the streets to welcome him with flags. Many people fought over who could host him, serenading him with Circassian songs and dances. People cooked feasts as they were not only reuniting with a long-lost brother, but also showing off how well they've preserved their traditions. Nowadays, whether it's due to globalization or social media, there is a rise in Circassians attempting to reclaim their culture. May 21st was marked as the Remembrance Day for the genocide, where my town does a walk for awareness. April 25th is the Circassian Flag Day. Festivals where Circassian dance groups of different nationalities travel around. Museums showing our older ways of life. Though it might be possible to restore the culture to how it once was, with thousands of years worth of history and practices gone, our culture is still actively being contorted and reshaped, sometimes by our very own people. But when all is said and done, it's a step in the right direction. I have no idea how my culture will pan out in the future. It might get miraculously revived, or the world might move on and forget with little to no evidence of our existence, like a candle at the end of its life. But I know that as long as I'm alive, so will my culture. And I can take comfort in the fact that as long as there is a town full of stubborn, priggish people like Fakama, so will Circassians.